I call David Seymour, 5-minute call on the ACT Party.
Mr Speaker, I rise on behalf of the ACT Party in support of this bill, and I think it is a very positive initiative for New Zealand to be involved in promoting investment in core public good infrastructure within countries that will make up an increasing proportion of our trading partnerships, as they have over the last period of time. And I might take a moment to reflect, Mr Speaker, on some of the earlier contributions and the inherent contradictions within them. It was enormously surprising to me, sir, that the New Zealand First contribution we've had to date was in opposition to New Zealanders investing in overseas infrastructure projects. And the reason that this surprised me, sir, is that every time any foreigner invests within New Zealand, they say that the profits are all going overseas and New Zealand is all the poorer. And if one was to follow the logic of that argument, one would have to think that we should be promoting as much investment by the New Zealand government in infrastructure projects overseas as possible in order that New Zealanders might be able to benefit from skimming back so many profits from overseas, as we are told happens when one country invests in another. But of course, that sort of contradiction is not the kind of contradiction that the New Zealand First Party generally has the intellectual horsepower to address. So we'll go no further. Mr Speaker, I certainly hope that when this bill is enacted and when this bank begins investment, it will focus on high-quality investment. And I think a number of contributors have raised their concerns about the quality of the investment and what sort of projects will be funded with the kind of capital that is being provided. Mr Speaker, I think it's extremely important for the growth of any regional economy that government funding, and this is government funding, this is transnational government funding, is put towards goods and in some cases services that are not readily available on the private market. Much of the frustration that Aucklanders presently have with the Auckland Council, for instance, sir, relates to the fact that the Council has become confused about whether it is providing public goods that are not readily available on private markets or whether it is providing a wider basket of goods competing with the private sector. And I would certainly hope that through this treaty we will find that New Zealand capital, to the extent it goes overseas to be used for investment overseas, is used in order to provide public goods. And it's a pity that the economics professor is not here, but we should put on record that public goods are those that have the quality that they, and he's absent in many senses.
No, order.
Mr Speaker.
You can't mention the absence of a member. Even by connotation.
Oh, apologies, Mr Speaker. There's presence I could mention, perhaps, but not in this instance. Mr Speaker, public goods are those that are rivalrous, non-rivalrous, I apologise, and that are non-excludable, meaning that everybody benefits from the presence of the good and that nobody can be explicitly excluded from its benefits. That is when we have cause for taxpayers to have their capital taken to provide a good that will benefit all. It's also useful to spend public money on assets that have a network effect. That is, that they have constantly increasing returns to scale, that only one provider in a marketplace can be efficient, or that the marketplace is most efficient with only one provider, and therefore it makes sense again for governments to be involved. But it would be a great shame if we were to see New Zealand capital going offshore to compete with the private sector in those countries, and I'm assured by the Honourable Minister that that is not the case, and that this capital will be going to build infrastructure overseas to enhance the economies and the productivity of our trading partners, and therefore increase the effective market size faced by New Zealanders. And on balance, that sounds like a very noble deployment of capital, and I wholeheartedly support this bill on behalf of the ACT Party. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call Ian McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.